You've heard of Marco Polo, right? Of course you have. But what if I told you there was another traveler from that same era whose journey was so epic it makes Polos look like a quick weekend trip? Yeah, let's get into this incredible story.
Okay, let's just start with this number because it changes everything. 120,000 kilometers. That's how far one person traveled in the 14th century. We're talking no planes, no trains, no cars. To really get a sense of that, it's like circling in the entire planet 3 times over.
And this slide, wow, it really puts it into perspective. You see Marco Polo, the guy we all know, who traveled about 24,000 kilometers, which is incredible in its own right. But then you look at our guy, Ibn Battuta. He covered nearly 5 times that distance. It's just staggering.
So, who was this man? Let's dive into it. Time to properly meet the Moroccan scholar whose travels completely blew the lid off what people thought was possible back then.
It all kicks off in 1325. Picture this. A 21-year-old law student, Ibn Battuta, leaves his home in Tangier, Morocco. His plan? It was actually pretty straightforward and pious. Make the pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj. But what started as a single trip, well, it turned into a 29-year odyssey across more than 40 of our modern-day countries.
So this is where things get really interesting. We're going to see how a sacred duty morphs into this all-consuming curiosity, where one single destination explodes into a lifelong quest. And this is the turning point. After he gets to Mecca and fulfills his religious duty, the normal thing to do was to just go home. But for Ibn Battuta, this was just the beginning. Instead of turning back, he looked ahead towards the massive, unknown horizons of Persia and way, way beyond. So you're probably asking, how on earth did he pull this off? He wasn't some rich prince or a government-funded explorer. Nope, he was just incredibly smart and resourceful. He basically plugged himself into the networks of the time, tagging along with trade caravans, hopping on merchant ships, and leading on the generosity that was often shown to scholars and pilgrims. Now, this concept, Dar el-Islam, is the absolute key to understanding how his whole journey was even possible. Think of it like a huge, interconnected civilization that stretched all the way from West Africa to Southeast Asia. Within this House of Islam, you had a shared faith, a shared culture, and a shared language. It meant a traveler like Ibn Battuta could show up almost anywhere and find a community, a hot meal, and a safe place to sleep. It was basically the infrastructure for globalization, 14th century style. All right, so now we get to see just how far this incredible network could actually take him. His journey just accelerates into this full-blown odyssey across Asia, taking him from the super-rich courts of India to the crowded ports of Imperial China. So in 1333, he rolls into Delhi. And get this, he doesn't just pass through. His legal knowledge is so impressive that the Sultan himself, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, makes him a high-ranking judge. He ends up staying for 7 years. This gave him a real insider's view of the incredible wealth and the intense political drama of the Delhi Sultanate. From India, the Sultan sends him to China as an ambassador, but bam, disaster strikes. His ship gets wrecked in a storm, and he washes up on the shores of the Maldives. But this is Ibn Battuta we're talking about. He doesn't see it as a setback. He just adapts. He marries into a powerful local family, and, you guessed it, his legal skills land him a job as a judge again. The man's resilience is just off the charts. He eventually does make it to China, visiting the massive port cities of the Yuan dynasty, and he's just blown away by the technology and how organized everything is. He writes all about things like paper money and the mass production of porcelain, but for one of the first times in his travels, he feels like a total outsider. He really admired China's order, but as a devout Muslim in a non-Muslim empire, he felt pretty culturally isolated. After almost 30 years on the road, you'd think he'd be desperate to get home, right? Well, not exactly. Even the journey back was a chance for him to explore new frontiers, this time across the vast continent of Africa. So he sails down the Swahili coast, and this place is just buzzing with wealth. He describes cities like Mogadishu and Kilwa not as some remote backwaters, but as these sophisticated hubs with beautiful coral stone buildings and thriving markets. He sees with his own eyes this huge trade network, watching gold from the African interior get traded for goods from as far away as China. He's almost home. He's so close to Morocco. But is he done? Nope. There's one last epic trip he has to make. This insane curiosity gets the better of him, and he turns south, joins a caravan, and sets off to cross the Sahara Desert to find the legendary Mali Empire. And what he finds there just completely shatters all the European ideas about Africa at the time. This was no primitive kingdom. He talks about its incredible wealth, fueled by so much gold it was almost like a common metal. He was super impressed by its culture of deep scholarly learning, especially in cities like Timbuktu. And he describes a really complex society with a political system that had mastered the insane challenge of trade across the entire Sahara.
And finally, we bring this incredible story home. The physical journey is over, but its impact on history is just getting started, cementing the legacy of, arguably, the world's greatest traveler. So in 1354, almost 30 years after he left as just a kid, Ibn Battuta walks back into his hometown of Tangier. The man's long walk is over, but his journey into the history books, that was about to begin. You see, the Sultan of Morocco hears these wild stories and is basically like, whoa, we have got to write this down. So he hires a scholar to record everything. The result is this book, the Rila, which simply means the journey. And it's truly one of the most important historical documents from the Middle Ages. It's a first-hand account of a world that was constantly moving. So why is this journey such a big deal? Well, he was way more than just a tourist. He was like an anthropologist before that was even a thing, taking notes on everything, from local customs to food. His book, The Rila, shows us that the 14th century world was way more connected than we usually give it credit for. But maybe most importantly, it gives us this rare, personal look at the history of this huge part of the world, from a guy who actually saw it all with his own two eyes. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Even after traveling 120,000 kilometers, there were still huge parts of the globe Ibn Battuta never saw. So if the most tireless traveler in history still had an unfinished map, what blind spots do we have on our own maps, even in our hyper-connected world today? What does that say about the limits of any one person's perspective?